Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer, shall we? Because for decades, Robert Greene's The 48 Laws of Power has been, well, let's be honest, absolutely notorious. A lot of people view it as this dangerous, super controversial manual for manipulators and sociopaths. But today we're going to look completely past that superficial reputation. We're going to decode the actual, profound psychological truths hidden within these pages and see how this text really serves as a masterclass in human nature, emotional control, and self-awareness. So at first glance, this famous red and blue book definitely looks like a Machiavellian playbook. Seriously, when you skim the table of contents, you hit these intense, borderline terrifying laws like crush your enemy totally and pose as a friend, work as a spy. And it's incredibly easy to see why people assume this is just a cutthroat guide for climbing the corporate ladder. But that surface-level reading, it entirely misses the actual, deeper value of the text.
To really grasp what's going on here, we have to look at the fundamental human drive this book is actually addressing. As Greene points out right off the bat, nobody wants to feel helpless. I mean, powerlessness just makes us completely miserable. We are all navigating this incredibly complex, often scheming modern world, and pretending that social dynamics just don't exist, well, that won't protect you from them, it just renders you totally blind. The book really isn't trying to make you evil, it's simply recognizing that the desire for some agency over your own life is a universal human condition.
And here is the absolutely crucial point, the big takeaway for us. We must look at it not in the literal sense. We literally have to translate these laws into an allegorical guide for mastering our own inner selves. So when the book tells you to crush your enemy totally, yeah, a literal reading sounds like unhinged aggression. But allegorically, your enemy could be a toxic habit, crippling self-doubt, or a deeply ingrained insecurity. If you leave even a single ember of that bad habit smoldering, the fire is absolutely going to break out again. We are meant to read this as a psychological decoder, mapping these ruthless social maneuvers directly onto our own internal battles.
What's super fascinating to me is that these concepts aren't just some modern corporate how-to jargon. Not at all. They are a distillation of human wisdom spanning thousands of years across vastly different civilizations. We're talking about everything from the brilliant military strategy of Sun Tzu in ancient China, to the graceful court politics of Castiglione in Renaissance Italy, all the way to the cunning seduction techniques of Ninon de l'Enclos in 17th century France. The sheer historical breadth here proves that these laws of human behavior are totally timeless. I mean, people have been playing these social games for millennia.
And when you start looking a bit closer, these hidden patterns begin to emerge. Take laws 3, 4, and 17, for example. They all revolve around the incredible power of mystery. We live in a hyper-connected world where everything is just over-explained and, honestly, a bit banal. By concealing your intentions, deliberately saying less than necessary, and cultivating unpredictability, you aren't just tricking people, you're preserving an aura of mystery. You're basically refusing to offer yourself up to the world as an easily consumed, totally predictable entity. It's all about maintaining strong boundaries and keeping people engaged by not giving the whole game away at once.
So ask yourself this. Why do we so often mistake aggressive action for effective action? Law 8 dictates, make other people come to you. Now, we usually feel like we just have to constantly chase problems, immediately react to every single email, and forcefully push our plans into reality to be deemed effective. But true power? It actually lies in mastering your own emotions and flat out refusing to react impulsively to anger or anxiety. When you force the other person to act, you are the one in control. But let me tell you, it requires immense emotional discipline to just stay back, keep calm, and let the situation naturally unfold.
And that emotional discipline is exactly what Law 23 is all about. Concentrating your forces. Again, looking at it not in the literal sense, this isn't about military combat on some battlefield, it's about focusing your mental energies on a single profound goal. Intensity defeats extensity every time. In an era where our attention is completely fragmented by constant multitasking, we tend to flit from one shallow pursuit to another, right? This law is a powerful reminder that you gain far, far more by finding a rich mine and digging deeper, concentrating your time and energy at their absolute strongest point.
But here's the crazy paradox. To maintain that focused energy, you actually have to remain incredibly flexible. And this brings us to the final law of the book. Assume formlessness. By mastering this inner self, you learn to let go of rigid habits and past mistakes. Because if you take a permanent, static shape, you just open yourself up to attack or stagnation. You protect yourself by being as fluid as water, adapting to new environments, and accepting that literally nothing is fixed. It's the ultimate psychological defense mechanism.
Okay, so what happens when other people start using these tactics on you? Take Law 40.
Despise the free lunch. Why is this one so crucial? Well, because what is offered for free is almost always dangerous. It usually conceals a psychological trick, a hidden obligation, or some kind of emotional hook. When someone offers you something for absolutely nothing, they are very often trying to bypass your rational defenses and create a deep sense of indebtedness. Understanding this dynamic really protects you from the subtle manipulations embedded in seemingly generous gestures.
This idea of understanding hidden motives extends perfectly to Law 13. When asking for help, appeal to people's self-interest, never to their mercy or gratitude. Now at first, yeah, that sounds incredibly manipulative, but let's reframe it. This is actually the ultimate lesson in social intelligence and empathy. Think about it for a second. To appeal to someone's self-interest, you first have to step entirely outside of your own ego. You have to train yourself to think your way inside the other person's mind and truly understand what they actually value, need, and fear.
And that, my friends, is exactly why power is a social game requiring you to be a master psychologist. Acknowledging people's individuality and hidden motives, rather than arguing or just blindly imposing your own prejudices onto them, is the single greatest piece of knowledge you can ever acquire. If you just talk about yourself and ignore the psychology of the person standing right in front of you, you're only going to generate resentment. Recognizing and validating what makes others unique, that is the absolute foundation of true influence.
To really develop our defensive vision against toxic power moves, Greene uses this brilliant fable. Picture this scene. A hot-blooded lion is furiously chasing a chamois. The prey leaps across a deep, deadly chasm, escaping safely to the other side. The lion stops short, realizing he just can't make the jump. But standing right next to him is his supposed friend, the fox, the highly calculated, observant manipulator who knows exactly what makes this lion tick.
The fox looks at the lion and slyly says, "Though the abyss be deep, yet, if you are only in earnest, I am certain you will clear it. Surely you can confide in my disinterested friendship." See what's happening here? The fox is weaponizing the lion's immense pride. He deliberately baits the lion's emotional weakness, egging him on to jump that impossible gap. And blinded by his boiling blood and the desperate need to prove his strength, the lion flings himself into space, tumbling to a fatal end at the bottom of the ravine.
You know, we all have foxes in our lives. And this brings up the really critical concept of the disinterested friend from Law 14. This is someone who poses as an ally, but subtly uses polite, everyday social encounters to artfully probe for your weaknesses, your insecurities, or your emotional triggers. We absolutely must recognize when someone is playing on our pride or hidden fears to push us into an abyss of bad decisions. This is exactly why reading this book as a defensive manual is so incredibly critical.
By really internalizing these laws, we create a robust defensive playbook for ourselves. We actually learn to see right through the masks of others. For example, understanding Law 26 helps you instantly recognize when you are being subtly positioned as a scapegoat to take the fall for someone else's blunders. Or, looking at Law 44, you can clearly identify when someone is using the mirror effect, mimicking your values to seduce you into a false sense of security, or deliberately mirroring your actions to infuriate you into making a sloppy mistake.
And unfortunately, this manipulation doesn't just happen one-on-one, it happens on a massive scale. The fable of the owl who was God perfectly illustrates Law 27, playing on people's need to believe in order to create a cult-like following. It perfectly shows how our overwhelming human desire to find saviors who offer simple, easy answers can lead us to blindly follow charlatans directly into absolute disaster. Understanding the mechanics of how blind faith is actually manufactured immunizes you against cultish leaders both in the workplace and in broader society.
So, returning back to where we started, this fundamentally shifts our entire perspective on the text. Mastering these laws isn't about cruelty at all. It's actually about sparing yourself and others the pain that inevitably comes from bungling with power, from playing with fire without knowing its properties. When you understand human psychology deeply, you actually become a far better friend, a better partner, and a better person overall, simply because you know how to navigate complex emotions gracefully and become a source of pleasure rather than a source of constant friction.
Which leaves us with this final, crucial thought for today's explainer. Will you remain a blind pawn, insisting the game just doesn't exist while being quietly manipulated by those who do? Or will you use this knowledge to protect your independence? Take these lessons into your everyday life. Remember to always look at it not in the literal sense, but ask yourself, how can you apply this profound psychological decoder to protect your peace, deeply understand those around you, and ultimately master your own inner self.